Renaissance emphasized the importance of the individual as well as secularism. The interest in humans apart from religion was called humanism. It grew in part from the Crusades, when Europeans and Muslims interacted. The rise of the middle class introduced new points of view and led to the belief that humans are unique individuals capable of great things. The Renaissance began in Italy, where powerful port cities had become city-states, independent of control of a king or even the church. Wealthy Italian leaders borrowed and loaned money without regard for the church's regulations against usury. Some of the wealthiest families, like the Cosimo de' Medici, became patrons of the arts and promoted the study of classical ancient literature. In Renaissance literature, the focus was less on religion and the church and more on Greek and Roman ideas of nature and beauty. Humanism, interest in the classics was a major part of the Renaissance. Humanists studied grammar, poetry, philosophy, history, and rhetoric, subjects that today are called the humanities. The first great humanist was Francisco Petrarca, a poet whose sonnets focused on a love of nature in the tradition of Roman writers. He is considered the father of Italian Renaissance humanism. He was super smart and was curious about finding Latin manuscripts to study their ideas. His searches set off other searches in monastic libraries throughout Europe. Monastic libraries throughout Europe. Another great humanist was William Shakespeare, a familiar English poet and playwright. Shakespeare used plots from ancient texts rebooted in an updated way for his comedies, tragedies, and histories. There were religious humanists also. Erasmus, a Roman Catholic priest, wanted to study and understand Christianity. He decided that the Catholic Church needed some changes and wrote in praise of folly, mocking church practices. Much of what he wrote was considered controversial in 1509, and some people even thought Erasmus was calling for the destruction of the Catholic Church. But Erasmus was only wanted to make certain reforms and leave other things unchanged. This would eventually inspire Martin Luther to call for reform within the church. Renaissance art also marked a return to ancient Greece and Rome. Painters and sculptors still featured religious scenes, but their central interest was imitating nature and rendering the human body in its most beautiful form. In architecture, painting, and sculpture, the focus was on the human-centered world. Major artists like Leonardo da Vinci, famous for the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, studied anatomy. They worked with the laws of perspective to create realistic works of art. Michelangelo's statue of the biblical hero David is a declaration of the perfection of the human form. Michelangelo wanted to portray the human being as a reflection of divine beauty. The more beautiful the body, the more godlike the figure. His fresco on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel features ideal bodies in perfect proportions. The sculptor Donatello studied Greek and Roman statues and sculpted figures such as the famous Christian figure St. George. Architect Filippo studied the buildings of classical Rome and designed churches with classical columns and rounded arches as an alternative to Gothic cathedrals. Outside of Italy, Flemish artist Jan van Eyck, for example, imitated nature by painting on wooden panels. By experimenting with oil paints, he was able to capture true-to-life details.